My name is Alfred John Baumann. I was born in Thiensville, Wisconsin, August 17, 1930. From there, I spent a few years in a Lutheran Children's Home in Wauwatosa, and from there I went to a farm in Nashotah, Wisconsin. I spent my teen years there. I was drafted into the U.S. Army in the 12th of June of 1951. I took my basic training in Fort Reilly, Kansas, and it happened to be the year when they had the big flood, so we bivouac out most of the time for our training, basic training. And I was shipped overseas, it was sometime in October, went over on a Marine Adder and landed in Osaka, Japan. We arrived in Osaka, Japan in October of 1951. From there, we were shipped to Inchon, Korea, where we disembarked and were placed in a replacement depot. We had orders from the replacement company to board trucks, and we ended up being dropped off with the 17th Infantry Regiment. I was assigned to King Company. That would have been in November or very early December of 1951. My company commander in King Company was Shelton Hoskins. My duties, of course, I arrived as a private, so I was just assigned to a squad and ended up as a assistant machine gunner. I was a rifleman when I went over there. And from being an assistant gunner, of course, when the gunner is shipped out or rotated out, then I became the gunner. From King Company and Reserve, they loaded us on trucks again and headed up to I understood it was a punch bowl. And we had to carry our duffel and all our supplies up that high mountain. It was, I think the elevation was like 1,283, something like that. And of course we had a bunker up there on the ridge, and you'd have to sit in the middle of the night, 20 below zero, and listen to the guns go off and try and defend yourself and take care of yourself. I stated that it was 20 below zero or colder up on that ridge. We wore every bit of clothing we had. We slept in a bunker underground. We'd steal some gasoline from the tankers and put it in little coffee cans and light it inside the bunker just to get a little warmth. It was a brutal winter. I got up online, and of course most infantrymen or soldiers got the GIs, and I got them one day. I couldn't get down to the company's command post soon enough where the slit trench was, so I went down the backside of the ridge and was taking care of myself, and the doggone Chinese dropped 3 mortar rounds around me, one below and one to each side. They were probably laughing at me. At night, you'd be huddled in your foxhole dress and all the clothes you could find with your parka hood up, trying to keep warm, and you'd hear those quad 50s going off and the B-52s going over, mortar rounds and artillery rounds going over, some coming back, and we'd throw, we had what we called, it was a magnesium or a illumination grenade we'd throw down the hill in front of us just to see if anything was creeping up. And a lot of live grenades also. We had moved off of the punch bowl and went, our company was moved to the outpost, or in the middle of the 2 lines of resistance. King Company seemed to always draw that assignment. We'd get right in the middle of things. Anyway, one night we had an awful firefight started. And shells were coming in all around us, landing on us, caved our bunkers in. Weber and I, he was the gunner at the time. It blew us right up in the air, slammed us back down on the ground. He fell back and holding his throat. I thought maybe he got a piece of shrapnel or something through his throat, but he pushed me away. He said, "Keep on firing, Baumann, keep on firing." And that was quite an experience. It's really something to see a whole line open up. Prior to that firefight, the Chinese started up their loudspeakers and they were telling us they were going to kill us all that night. They knew who we were too. They said, "All you guys from King Company are going to die tonight." And they had their bugles going and whistles and all kinds of racket. And as the firing started, we could hear them coming to us, but I never did see any. We were too busy just keeping that machine gun going. We had times when we come off the line, go into reserve for a week or 2 weeks. We get our beer ration and our cigarette ration. They'd give us a day or two to tie one on, so to speak, and then it was back to training. One day they took us out field over up into the mountains to a mountain stream. And I had noticed to the north that the clouds were very dark and the river was high and flowing fast. Well, King Company went out with this lieutenant. I don't know what his name was. It wasn't from our company. He was going to teach us how to cross a river without getting our equipment wet. So he took a poncho half, gathered a bunch of brush and stuff and folded it in half and showed us how to do it. And he says, "Now we're all going across a squad at a time." And I said, "Sir," I said, that water's awful fast. I said, "Why don't you send one across, and if he makes it, then send us, then send the squad." Okay, I told the lieutenant, I said, "Sir, why don't you send one man across, and if he makes it, they can throw a line, or if he makes it safely, you can send a squad across." And he looked me in the eye and he said, "Corporal," he says, "I have to get this company across this afternoon, and they are going across by squad." Well, he shipped that first squad over, and they all got swept downstream except the last little runt on the rear. He got his toes wet and he backed away because he could see what was happening to the other boys. They got swept downstream and they all drowned. Yes, all 8 men, and I always call that an exercise in arrogance and ignorance. The officer didn't want to listen to a corporal, and he did not know the river. Well, those 8 men, the whole squad was swept downstream, and not a one survived. And the irony of the whole thing was that about 3 days later, I was in the company area, and I had a call from the CP, and they says, "Baumann," says, "you have to go down to Graves registration." I said, "Well, what for?" "Well, we have 3 bodies that we can't identify, and we want you to tell us who they are." And that was a hard thing to do because it was so senseless. I identified them, and I often wondered, well, what did the company commander send to the mothers or the wives or sisters of those boys that they died in combat or in a training accident? In June 17th or 16th of 1952, King Company was selected or volunteered to take a hill occupied by the Chinese or Koreans or whoever was up there. Anyway, at the staging area, we got there late at night, and the assault was scheduled to get off at dawn. Well, while we were waiting for dawn, I heard my platoon leader, whose name was Lieutenant Balls, and Lieutenant Rennerman talking. And they says, "Boy, I sure hope this assault goes well. We have a lot of dignitaries watching this." And I'm sitting there listening, and I'm thinking, man, we're just putting on a show for these people. And we were supposed to have artillery support, air support, and we never got a thing. The Chinese had a listening post at the bottom of the hill. They heard us coming. They went up to the top, of course, before us, got everybody ready, and they didn't open fire until we were right on top of them. And then they cut loose with everything they had. and we lost a lot of good men. And we got pushed off the hill, of course. Our men, we fought as good as we could, but it got to the point that we were getting overwhelmed. So one of the guys next to me said, Baumann, we got to get out of here. I said, yeah, okay, go ahead. Gomez, one of the soldiers next to me, said, Baumann, we got to get out of here because the Chinese were coming down after us. And I said, all right, go ahead. I'll be right with you. But I had 3/4 of a belt of ammunition left. So while those guys turned around and ran, some of them dropped their weapons or whatever was loose, I stayed back there and finished off my belt of ammunition in short bursts. I used a 90-degree arc, a couple rounds all the way around until I was out of ammunition, and then I took off. Halfway down, I found an abandoned machine gun. I picked that up and carried it along down with me. Now, another irony of that story is our company commander, who was Captain Simpson, sent 2 of his platoons up, and he kept 2 in reserve with the thought that when the firing started, those 2 reserve squads or platoons would come up and help us. Well, of course, the minute the Chinese started firing, those guys down below took cover. They were pinned down, or so they told me when we came down. And it was just a fiasco from the word go. Okay, when I got down to the bottom of the hill, there was some of the other platoon along the line of retreat, back to the staging area, and one of them was a buddy of mine. And he mentioned something to me, and I said, where the heck were you guys? I said, we could have used you up there. Oh, he said, we got pinned down by enemy fire. And I said, well, how do you think it was up there? And he didn't have a response for me, and he never talked to me after that. Okay. We lost that night approximately, I heard 22 men. I don't know if that's true or not. I do know that my platoon leader was killed, Lieutenant Rennerman was killed from the other platoon, and a host of other boys. My assistant gunner, I ran out of ammunition before the retreat, and I hollered at one of the guys, where's Gomez? Not Gomez, his name was Mendoza. I said, where's Mendoza? He pointed back down. I went back down, here he was, hunched down in a depression in the ground, praying like a son of a gun. Well, I don't like to tell you this, or anybody this, but I kind of lost my cool. Of course, everything is going off at one time. I kicked the guy. I said, you should have done your praying before we left. I grabbed a box of ammo, loaded my gun, and ran back up to where the fighting was. I never saw Mendoza after that. I don't know if when I kicked him he was already wounded or if he died, or I just never saw him after that. When we got back to the company area, of course, Captain Simpson had a debriefing for all the men, and I sat down with him. He asked me my story. I told him what it was. And he says, well, Baumann, I'm putting you in for the Silver Star. Now, he didn't state that as a supposition. He stated it as a fact. I am going to put you in for the Silver Star. I never received it. The middle of June, I'm getting close to rotation. And I never gave that Silver Star thought too much after that. Once I got back to the States and finished my time and got discharged, I didn't go over there to get a medal. I'm glad I survived and got home alive. But over the years, I have told this story to my sons and my family only. And they've always been after me to go after that Silver Star. So about a year ago, I went to my county veteran service officer, and they got the ball rolling for me, and we're seeking a DD-215. And Lieutenant John Reynoldson can corroborate my story, and he's the one that's helping me now trying to get that Silver Star. Okay, at one of our reunions up in Alaska, we were riding back to our hotel on one of the buses, and a gentleman sat down next to me. We introduced ourselves, and his name was Jack Reynoldson. And we got talking. I told him who my company commander was and that I was with King Company. And he says, "Oh," he says, "were you in on the that assault on Hill 502?" I said, "Yeah." Well, he says, "Do you know who that man was, that soldier was that came down? It was the last one down the hill carrying 2 machine guns." And I looked at Jack. I was flabbergasted. You are looking at him and speaking to him. He had watched the whole operation from an outpost or a bunker on the main line of resistance. He watched the whole show.